Welcome to the Business Growth Accelerator Show. Thank you so much for joining. Our primary goal here is to help you as an entrepreneur to grow your business fast with as little resources possible. We talk about everything from smart digital marketing skills and business strategy to motivation and soft skills. Top interviews with industry leaders to inspire and give you the skills to grow your business. I'm your host, Pierre Muller. Now let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Today, you're in for a special treat. Our guest is Samuel Donner. He hosts the fantastic podcast show, Finding Founders. If you haven't heard it yet, do yourself a favor. The production is excellent and it's very entertaining. It's a podcast about vulnerability and entrepreneurship. They really delve deeply into the stories of business founders and highlight the moments where they were most vulnerable and their journey from hardship to success. Samuel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. Samuel, so firstly, let's delve into your backstory. I would really love to know what's your backstory, what really led, into Finding Founders podcast, and really what's your passion behind what you do.
Yeah, passion is definitely a big one. So I'll delve into that in a bit. But there's like it's kind of when you think about when you got inspiration for something, you can go back as far as childhood, but I'll try to keep it shorter. So for me, I really got into everything when I was in college. So I started at college, mechanical engineering, quickly realized that was not interesting to me at all. And so I got into entrepreneurship through an entrepreneurship fraternity on campus, and was really inspired by all these people around me. But I didn't really have like that idea. I didn't have, I'm gonna make this tech startup or something. And because of that, I kept doing my engineering degree, but on the side, I was pursuing other creative projects. I was doing a lot of video work, started doing some freelance video, actually worked up to a contract with Netflix, doing some video stuff for their post-production department. But as I was going through video, I was learning all these like really cool editing skills, but I felt that those editing skills weren't as like leveraged in the medium of video as they could be in a new growing medium. And I had been loving podcasts and delving deeply into them. And I thought, well, what if I applied all these editing skills that I've learned from video editing to a new medium like podcasting? And so my first interviews were just my roommates, like because again, all my friends are entrepreneurs, they all have their own businesses. So I'm like, all right, let me just interview these guys. And that's how it all started. But very quickly after that, it kind of snowballed. So I knew to differentiate myself, I needed to do something higher production, because who cares what I have to say? I'm just some college student. And so I applied that higher production to that first episode. And then after that, I could really like contact anyone I wanted and have them agree to an interview. And that's where things got started. But I did get a big break with one of my first big guests. I can go into that if you'd like me to.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I think well done on following your passion. I think that's fantastic. And your skill set really shows in the productions. They are really fantastic. So yeah, please share more with us in terms of that big break and what happened.
Yeah. So when I was getting into podcasting, there were a couple things that I was listening to. So I initially got into NPR podcasts, specifically How I Built This. I'm sure that anyone who's a fan of entrepreneurial stories has heard that, especially narrative entrepreneurial stories. And I've been listening to NPR since I was a kid. My mom would listen to nothing but NPR in the car. And so I grew up listening to all these high production stories. And so naturally, when I went to college and was interested in entrepreneurship, I'm like, okay, let's seek let's seek my niche that I'm interested in, but still have that high production. So initially, How I Built This was the move. But I was also listening to things like Planet Money. And one of the people that was a producer on Planet Money was Alex Bloomberg, who started Gimlet. And his first podcast was a podcast called Startup. And basically it's about him making a podcast company and making a podcast about creating that podcast company.
Okay.
And I thought it was so meta and weird and interesting. And I loved the first season. And I got one of my friends into it. And then we started listening to the second season when it came out, right? And I remember I was a sophomore in college at UCLA. and I was listening to the second season of Startup, which is about the founder of American Apparel, Dov Charney.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really, really interesting season. And we had gotten through the first half, and there was this throwaway line in the first half where it's like the reporter who's profiling this guy, Dov Charney, and following him around in the office, and he has this factory because he founded American Apparel, but he's starting this new business that is also apparel. And she says this line where it's like, this guy always picks up his phone. And I'm thinking about that, and the cogs are turning. Like, there's no way he always picks up his phone.
Mm.
And so I did a little bit of internet sleuthing and found his number online and called him up, right? And so
Well
I'm
done.
calling him up thinking like, okay, like this will be a diversion from listening to this episode, and then we'll go back to listening to the episode, and it'll be like it didn't happen, right? And so it's ringing and ringing, and then it says like, hello. And I'm totally unprepared for this because I'm not thinking anything past like, I'm just gonna call this guy up. I had nothing prepared. And
Yeah.
me, like as a sophomore thinking about what I'm gonna do this summer, I'm like, can I have an internship? And he's like, yeah. And so the timing didn't work out with my holiday, but I kept in contact with him throughout the next couple years, as a friend, as somewhat of a mentor. And 2 years later, when I had finished my first episode, I'm thinking, racking my brain, okay, who in my network can I talk to for this next episode?
Mm.
And Dove came to mind. So I texted him and I'm like, hey, this is what I've done. I've done this episode with my friend. Here's what it sounds like. Would you be open to doing an interview? And he's like, come down to my factory tomorrow. And let's record it. And so I went, and then after that interview, like, because Dove is such a big figure in entrepreneurship, and like his company was, worth close to $1 billion back when there was only a few $1 billion companies, that just opened the floodgates. And after that, like every entrepreneur that I contacted was like, yes, yes, yes. And then things built from there, and the audience grew and the team grew. And it's been a roller coaster since.
Wow, sure. No, man, but well done. And I think it's fantastic. I think, and a great example in entrepreneurship of taking those big steps and putting yourself out there, and then things will happen, doors will open. So I think that's fantastic, and well done for doing that.
Yeah, the door, just like on that note, really, I think what a lot of people struggle with is not putting that first thing out. And going from 0 to 1. And like I have friends that are really, really organized and have been at startups that have gone from like 3 employees to like 20, or from 2 million in revenue to 30 million in revenue, right? And they're really good at taking things from 0 to 100, but there's a lot of fear associated with going from 0 to 1. And what I say to that is like, my first episodes, you can listen to them. They're still on there. They're not good. But what I did is I just said, I'm going to consistently put out episodes. I'm going to build out a team around this to help me do that. And now it's 2 years later, and we've put out like 80 episodes once a week. And it's been a wild ride.
Wow, sure. No, that's a great lesson. It's so tempting to fall into that perfectionism trap where you want to perfect something before you really put it out. And I think just a great lesson from you and your example of just putting it out there and just taking those steps, and things will follow. So I think great lesson for our audience. So I'm talking about good lessons. I mean, you've interviewed several business founders and heard some great stories, where they went from hardship to success, sort of everything in between. And we would just love to hear some of those stories, and to find some inspiration in them for entrepreneurs. So I want to really hand you the floor and just invite you. Please tell us some of your stories. What are those favorite stories that you have, and just anything really that can inspire us as entrepreneurs in these times in terms of motivation or skill set that we need, anything. So the floor is really yours.
So, I mean, obviously, doing so many of these interviews, there are so many stories. I'm going to first maybe start off with the founder of Masterclass, which I think his story is super inspiring. But before I go into that, like, I really do believe that no one's story is boring. It's just too long. And that's kind of what we tell the team, that there is this way to look at a story in terms of expansion and contraction. And so someone who maybe is a less renowned founder or has less experience, their story's not going to be an hour long. It might be 30 minutes, but it can still be as interesting. You just have to
Mm.
shrink the boring parts and expand the exciting parts. And
Yes.
so I think that's why I really like the format that we've chosen, which is this narrative format, is because like sometimes I'll do an interview and I'm like, that interview was so boring, right? It was like 2
Yeah.
hours and I'm like, that was so boring. But
Yes.
what ends up happening is those interviews end up being some of my favorite episodes because we contract the boring parts, expand the interesting parts, and it ends up being like a really good representation of what this person has done. So
Okay.
with that disclaimer, there are a couple of ones that jump out to me as my favorite. One of the more recent, like bigger founders we've done was Masterclass, which we did a few months ago. And obviously we've done a lot of great people since then. But this one really stands out to me because he like Masterclass was expanding wildly at that point. It was constantly in my ads on my computer. I was constantly getting like Masterclass ads, and the team was like, "Oh my god, we got Masterclass!" Like I've seen that, and like there was also a student discount at that time where you could get like the Masterclass for 99 cents or $1. And so there was just a lot of hubbub about it. So going into that, I was really, really excited because one, I was excited to hear the story, but two, I was a little nervous because like this guy seems like a really big deal. And like,
Mm.
sometimes people who are big deals can be assholes.
Yeah.
But like not the case at all. And like an incredible amount of love went into his storytelling, and he's
Mm.
a total sweetheart. Um, and something that there's two things that like jump out to me in that story. One is and then this is true for a lot of our stories, is there's a lot of these seeds and values and ideologies that are planted in childhood. And for him, one of those ideologies was through his grandmother who survived the Holocaust, right? And he's Jewish, and he was telling that story about how his grandmother survived the Holocaust and went to America and just had the worst time trying to use a degree that she had and apply it in America just because of sexism
Mm.
and anti-Semitic sentiment, right? But what she did is she persevered, and she knew the value of education. And so there's this scene in the episode where she's like sitting him down and saying like, there is nothing more important than education. Education can set you free. And like he obviously put that somewhere in his mind for the next 20 years, and now he's creating a platform that can educate at scale, right?
Mm.
And
Fantastic.
not only educate at scale, but create something that is engaging, right? And like that, and when I say educate at scale, it's not just like that it can reach a lot of people, but it can actually inspire a lot of people,
Yeah.
which are two separate things. You can create a boring YouTube video and possibly reach everyone, but that's not actually educating at scale because who's going to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
But masterclass is educating at scale in a way that both can reach a bunch of people, but also engage a bunch of people, which I thought is an incredible mission that you can trace back to, he's 6 years old and
Yeah.
sitting in his
Wow.
grandmother's lap.
Sure.
And the second thing that comes out to me in that story is the moment of deep, deep despair, right? So this is when he had already started. So this is David Rogier. He had already started Masterclass, right? And it's churning. He's raised a little bit of money, but he hasn't gotten. He's gotten maybe like a couple Masterclass people to sign on as teachers, but like that was a battle. He didn't get anyone for 8 months. That was a battle in itself. Finally gets a couple people, and then it's like, all right, we have enough to launch, right? So he launches, and that first day, sales, nothing,
Nothing.
nothing,
Wow.
right? After like so much promotion, he's in all these articles, and he's thinking like, this is the biggest thing ever. Like he's putting all his time into it, and
Yes.
he's imagining that this launch is going to be the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then to see close to zero sales,
Wow.
he went home and cried. Right? He couldn't believe that the thing that he had put years of his time into would have been a failure, right?
Mm.
And so he goes home, talks to his grandparents, he talked to his parents, and says like, I think things are over. Um, and hangs his head. And his parents are like, well, just put on a brave face. So he goes into work the next day, like on the verge of tears, putting on a brave face, trying to
Mm,
mask it for the employees.
mm.
And then his marketing person comes over with a huge smile and says, "You won't believe what happened last night." And he was referencing something, some like marketing term that I'm blanking on right now, but
Mm.
basically things were much better the second day than they were the
Oh,
first
wow.
day, and the growth was exponential, and then it's been
Yeah.
exponential since, right? So that just, I think, like that, story shows that sometimes, as the classic saying goes, it's darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
The moment of despair is sometimes moments before the moment that you succeed.
Yeah.
And that story really stands out to me. But obviously, there's hundreds of stories
Mm.
within the interviews that we've done that I could touch on that have inspired me personally or given me advice that I've used throughout my career as a podcaster, someone trying like
Yeah.
starting a business and managing a team.
Yeah. Sure. No, I mean, what an inspiring story. I mean, it's great, great just to think everyone's got a story and everyone's got an upbringing. It's amazing just to think how you can channel that, and that's really what becomes our unique voice, and how we can express that. And yeah, just a great story. I mean, 8 months, and I can imagine just the build up and this massive launch, and there's nothing. I can just imagine the despair. I mean, we talked about
Oh yeah.
perfection earlier, and really just building up to this massive point, and then there's nothing. So, yeah, I think a great lesson, because I mean, it's again, if we think of where we are now in the world, I think times are tough, and it's been really, really been changing. It's sort of been stop start, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs might be sort of in a state of despair, where I mean, cash flow might be tight. It might be a time to redesign their business. And I reckon the message is just hang on there. I mean, if we have to
Mm.
redesign our business, we have to do it. But it's really a time just to hang on there and push through, and the fruits will come if we just take those actions. Don't wait for perfection. Just take big actions.
And also, like, to add on to holding in there, I think more than that is there's massive opportunity within this time. Like, the people that are willing to restructure and change the business are the people that will succeed. There are a lot of people that will just hang in there hoping for pre-COVID situation to arise. That's not going to happen. Like, COVID has irrecoverably changed the landscape of countless industries. And so if you want to succeed and prosper and be ahead of the competition and actually grow exponentially, you not only have to, you don't just have to hold on, you have to adapt and recognize the opportunity that is inherent in any massive paradigm shift. And this is
Yeah.
a paradigm shift. And there are people that are doing that. Like we had a circle back with one of our founders who founded a company called Ordermark that basically makes online ordering for restaurants easier in the midst of COVID, where they thought it was going to be impossible to raise money. They raised $120 million,
Wow.
most of it coming from SoftBank. So,
Wow.
like, there is opportunity there. You just have to know where to look,
Yeah.
and also keep looking. So it's both hang in there, but also don't hang in with the same things and same work attributes and plans that you came into the pandemic with. You have to
Yeah.
completely change everything that you're doing to adapt.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, wonderful opportunity. I mean, we're basically moving. It's like moving into the internet, into the internet ages. I mean, there's great new opportunities, and if you sort of sit down and you're in despair, you maybe sold something that didn't work in the internet age. I mean, it's really a time to redesign and to look for those opportunities, and it's wonderful, and it's
Exactly.
big, and it's great. Samuel, thanks so much. I mean, this has really been fantastic. It feels like we have to continue talking and maybe do another session. I mean, it sounds like you've got so many great stories that we would love to share, but we're running out of time. So I want to ask you just one last nugget or piece of advice that you can give to entrepreneurs in these times.
Obviously, consistency is something that is really, really like really, really stressed in entrepreneurship and especially content creation. Consistency is key, right? But more than just consistency is building the framework in which consistency can thrive. And I found that consistency thrives best when I have a framework that doesn't just depend on me alone. That I have other people that I loop into projects that can hold me accountable and make sure that I'm putting in the work each week. With
Yeah.
each project that I take on, I'll either loop in a team member or a friend that is working with me on the project, because then I can hold them accountable and then they can hold me accountable. When I was first starting Finding Founders, I did the first few episodes alone and very sporadically, and then I started looping in people to help me out with the project. And then that's when we got into a weekly cadence where I'm like, I can't make the excuse where I say, oh, I won't release something this week. I'll release it next week because I have other people depending on my work to do their work.
Yeah.
And so creating the framework for consistency is really, really important. And often, if you like working with other people, as I do, that framework includes other people.
Yeah, sure. Great advice. It helps us to keep us motivated. We can't try and do everything ourselves. So it just really helps us to scale and leap forward. But thank you so much for your time. For our audience, go and check out findingfounders.co. Samuel, any last thing? What are you busy with? What can we go and check out? What are you offering at the moment?
Yeah. So in terms of where you can check us out, look up Finding Founders wherever you get your podcasts. We actually have a virtual summit on biohacking and artificial like body enhancement and the secrets of longevity coming up on March 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m. PST. We have a bunch of past founders that we've had and some new voices that you'll hear. I'm also working on a project with a company called Wondery, a new business podcast. So really excited about that. And just like we're doing the team is really excited for our next series that's coming out. So we did a series traveling to Puerto Rico, talking to entrepreneurs over there. And our next series is on drug dealers. So we have people that have trafficked $150 million of cocaine. We had people that work with the cartel to like manage operations with marijuana distribution in the early 2000s. We have people in Scotland that really were in the MDMA game in the early 2000s when that was the drug of choice over there. And so really like delving into these stories that are really entrepreneurial, but not the entrepreneurial kind of mantras or niches that we might expect.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because those entrepreneurs, it takes some leadership and it takes some entrepreneurial and marketing skills to make that work. So,
dude, it takes everything that it takes to build a tech startup. It takes to build a drug empire.
Yeah.
And that's what I was realizing. Like, and it's funny because a lot of the entrepreneurs that I have interviewed are like, yeah, I sold a lot of drugs in high school or college.
Okay. Wow.
And so often that's a stepping stone to greater things.
Yeah, sure. Simon, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our audience did as well. Check out the resources. We'll put it in the show notes and I will really go and have a look at that. Thanks again. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good one.
If you want to ensure that you get free access to the entire series of content and interviews, plus more tips, tools, and tricks to grow your business, be sure to join our free Facebook group, Get More Customers. You will find a link in the description or show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, love button depending on which platform you use. This will really help us to get this message out to more entrepreneurs. We would also love to hear from you, so please engage with us and reply. What business are you in, or which speakers would you love to hear on the show? See you next time. Cheers.